The next few slides are really based on that white paper by the Lego Foundation, so please download it and have a look. And we're going to look at how to encourage playfulness through guided play and get really practical. Now, the research has shown, again, meta-studies that actually just confirm what I was saying earlier about the test of playfulness, that we look for 5 elements in playful experiences, and that is joyful, meaningful, actively engaging, iterative, and social and communicative. Those are the type of experiences that we want children to have, for those little brains to really switch on. Now, it is worth noting that not all of those will always be present in every type of play, but they're really great for us to aim for. And underscoring all of this is a theme of agency. What is agency? If we think back to Erickson, another developmental psychologist that I'm sure you're familiar with, he said that from 0 to 2, children are developing attachment, and then from 2 to 4, children are in this phase known as autonomy versus shame and doubt. They have this innate drive to learn, to master things, to become independent. In fact, from the moment they become mobile, we see this. They want to explore, they want to touch, they want to move. They have the desire to control and to choose. Through this exploring and hopefully positive reinforcement of that exploring, they develop an internal optimism. They develop this internal idea that I can do things, that I have control over some parts of my world, and that I can develop mastery in what I'm doing. It's also linked to studies which are by Duckworth on grit and resilience. So the first 2 concepts is joyful and meaningful play. And in the table, you will see that I compare the joyful and meaningful play to the quality on the test of playfulness, and that is intrinsic motivation. Joyful play is play that provides enjoyment, that stimulates that dopamine that we were talking about earlier. Meaningful play is play that the child can relate to previous experience and holds significance for them. And as I said, this is linked to intrinsic motivation from our test of playfulness, and that is really that desire to learn, to be engaged, to be thinking and exploring their world. So what the research shows us around this concept of joyful play is that our emotions and learning are wholeheartedly linked. So I've already mentioned the dopamine is released when children experience joy. It stimulates the brain's reward system, which then also strengthens pathways related to memory, attention, creativity, and motivation. The converse is also true. When children feel anxious or unsafe in a learning environment, their brain literally retreats into that primitive animal brain, and the frontal lobe cannot light up for learning. So it's absolutely crucial that our children are happy and joyful in their play. So meaningful play. New information is learned better when we can connect it to what we already know. Real life contexts are very important for little ones. And if they have some grounding or some content, they can then build on that content, ask why, and learn some more about a concept. Meaningful play is also related to motivation, mindset, and grit. Because when it is meaningful and I'm motivated to engage in it, then I'm more able to persevere through challenges. So compare that to a child who's come into your class and who says they can count. And they go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then in a moment, you put some things in front of them to count, and they actually have no idea how to count. This is an example of meaningful counting. When counting, actually, they have the concrete understanding of what counting is, and they can point from one item to the next item and know that when I get to the end of those items, pointing with my finger and counting, that is the number of items in front of me. That's very different to just rote counting. So how can we encourage joyful and meaningful play? Well, I want to encourage you with your play spaces that are available to you to make them interesting, to change them up every now and again, to add novelty, to add little flags, to dress up the tree, make it interesting for children. And very importantly, in your classroom, design, not decorate. It's actually, from a sensory point of view, very overwhelming for little ones when the wall is pasted full of posters and pictures. Choose what you put on the wall very specifically, maybe things that are aligned with your theme only. to make the space very playful. In an experiment, their children were being shown shapes, and instead of being told, as it would have been in directed instruction, that this is a triangle, this is what makes a triangle, and this is a circle, that's what makes a circle, and this is a square, that's what makes a square, the properties of those shapes, they were told that they had to discover the secret of shapes. And they were given magnifying glasses and special glasses to wear when they were looking at each different shape. And then they were asked to tell the teacher, what is the secret of being a triangle or a circle or a square? And so you can see just in the different approach, you're eliciting that child's imagination, their interest, their motivation, and they are having to think for themselves. And that was shown in an experiment that the children who were given in that group, who asked to come up with the secret of shapes, they could remember and recall those shapes for far longer afterwards. There's more research on dialogic reading, or also known as book sharing. Now, the reason that this kind of reading is so powerful is because when you read to your child, don't read the words on the page until they're about 3 years old. Look at the pictures with them, point and name. And when you see items that relate to your own child's experience, children you're teaching, then point those out. You are making it meaningful to them. In fact, the research that has come from book sharing has shown that children's attention rate doubled within 8 weeks of book sharing. That was just 15 minutes a day with their carer, engaging in specific techniques. The attention rate doubling in child psychology terms means an increase of 14 points in IQ. So it is huge, and it just shows how when you make something meaningful for a child, you are really engaging that little brain. Actively engaging play, the third quality. Think about the last time you had to learn something. Imagine trying to learn to drive with absolutely no hands-on experience. It would be impossible. It's becoming so involved and invested in what you're learning that you can't help but learn naturally. This is very much related to internal control from the test of playfulness. It's hands-on and minds-on. When I'm using my hands, I'm engaging my brain. Children should not be sitting at tables or trying to be kept still at this age in early childhood development. Learning should be discovery-based, just like that example with shapes. It's how can we discover something? When earlier I've talked about guided play and adults populating the environment for child discovery, that means putting novel items in the play space and asking them to find them, telling them that you're on an adventure, that they're pirates and they need to find the missing coins or whatever it is in the theme that you're doing. So always engaging that little mind in a discovery-based way. There's another experiment example of a novel toy, and children were put into 2 groups with an adult. And in the one group, the adult showed them how to play with the toy. And in the other group, the adult pretended not to know at all how to play with the toy, and they discovered together. So in the adult-led group, when the child's just doing what the adult does, they think that that is all there is to know about that toy, because they assumed that the adult had shown them all there is to know about the toy. Whereas the other group kept exploring and finding more and more ways that this toy worked because of this discovery-based idea of learning. So how can we practically encourage actively engaging play? Well, open-ended toys. So open-ended toys are vitally important to have in your classroom. The more blocks, the better. You can get plank blocks, you can get unit blocks, the nude wooden blocks, you can get colored blocks, you can get plastic blocks, anything that encourages the child to build things that are interesting to them and engage in play that is interesting to them. In fact, recycling and just big cardboard boxes can really provide endless play opportunities because they're open-ended. There's no right or wrong way to play with those items. And then sensory play, also play that we tend to avoid because it's messy, but playing with mud, playing with sand, playing with water, with slime and goop is absolutely critical for this type of play. And little ones naturally gravitate to it because it is so experimental, and because there is no right or wrong way to play with it. Let's look at iterative and imaginative play. So iterative play is when you are given the freedom to make mistakes, when you can form a hypothesis and test it out. And imaginative play is really pretend play. This links to the suspension of reality element that was from our test of playfulness, which is again the imagination, using conventional objects in unconventional ways. I love this quote by Rutherford and Hound. We don't teach uncertainty in schools. It should be the absolute bedrock of what we teach children. How we come to know and how we describe reality. In fact, we teach the opposite. And I want you to think back to an experience as a young child where you really felt that you couldn't make a mistake. And how did that make your brain feel? How did that make you feel? Going back to how intricately involved our emotions are to learning, and how positive emotions literally open up that brain through those neurochemicals. Think about the fact that if we pressurize children to think there's only one way, there's only one right answer, that they can't make mistakes, we really are squashing this type of play. Learning is not static. Yes, there's only one right answer to 2 + 2 is 4, but there are plenty of ways in our world, especially now, where creative thinking is needed. In peer learning, children learned more with the same age children in a group than in adult-guided activity. So that also talks to how imaginative and iterative play happens better in groups because children can spark each other's ideas. In pretend play, we see that the brain circuits that are being built are actually linked to empathy and understanding that other people have different perspectives to our own. And this also links back to a book I read many years ago by Gopnik, which I really recommend, called Scientists in the Crib. And it talks about how little babies are always hypothesis testing. They're always curious, and internally they're asking how, and they're testing different ideas. That's how they first learn to shake a rattle. They make predictions and they test those predictions, and they make theories about how things work. If I shake this thing, it makes a noise. They are driven to understand and make meaning from the world around them and from exploring the world around them. And they're actually primed, their brains are primed to look for categories, relationships between things, order, and patterns. So what are practical ways that you can encourage iterative and imaginative play? Well, one of the best ones I can think of is toy rotation. So making sure that you're always adding novelty and changing up the toys in your class. Children really do not need shelves and shelves of toys, but rather stick to those open-ended toys and rotate them often. Then sensory play again, but particularly when you're engaging in sensory play and letting the children explore, asking what if questions. So what if we filled the boat with a rock? How many rocks would it take to make the boat sink? And constantly encouraging them to make up their own theories. Then imaginary play is obvious. Imaginary play is, there's no right answer when you are imagining or pretending. It really encourages children to develop the perspective taking that they need. And then challenge. Very importantly, I think our world has become all about making things as safe as possible. And while I agree I would never put children at risk, we also need to think how we can challenge them. How can we just push them that little bit more with scaffolding, as I've already outlined? So one example is learning to balance. You know, we tend to say, you'll fall, but rather say, how can we do this more safely together? What kind of support does the child need? Do they need me to hold their hand? Do they need me to first make it lower for them until they reach that confidence, and then they will curious and they will explore a higher ledge next time? So challenge is good. It pushes their boundaries a little bit and links to iterative play. One last point on learning to make mistakes and why it is so fundamental. At this age, you're developing your own mental self-talk. And I think a lot of us might attest as adults to the fact that that type of instruction where there's only one right way and you're scared to explore, you're scared to make mistakes, can develop negative self-talk. And so be very careful about how you approach those challenges, how you approach something that is considered risk-taking with little ones, or making mistakes. When they spill something, when they trip, think about how you can frame that positively. How can I help you? Or how can we do that better next time? Instead of a very punitive or negative response. And that will really develop positive self-talk. The last one is social and communicative play. And that really speaks for itself. It's learning to share. It's play that encourages sharing, compromising, taking turns, negotiating, and learning to operate as a team. And it really correlates with that test of playfulness item known as framing. The research shows that social play enables children to learn turn-taking, collaboration, following rules, empathy, self-regulation, self-confidence, impulse control, and motivation. These are all known as pro-social skills. They are the emotional and social skills required for academic learning, for school readiness. Think about that for a second. We tend to think that academic skills are needed for academic readiness, but actually the research has shown that these skills have a greater influence on cognitive development and are as essential in learning to read as displaying competence in recognizing sounds and letters. In fact, some studies show that the better the emotional and social skills, the more that is linked to academic competence. And we see this in babies. In the first hour of life, after birth, they are locked in to that parent's gaze. They are social beings from day one, from minute one. In fact, as I've mentioned before, that first 2 years, that attachment period is so critical. It's the basis for all health and well-being, is that first trusting relationship with our caregivers. It's where we know the world is safe, that we can trust it, that we can expect our most basic needs to be met. And once that happens, as I've said, the brain lights up for learning. Different areas of the brain become available, as it were, to developing neural patterns and circuits. And it is attentive, responsive caregiving that builds that brain, that actually lays down the foundation for social skills. We tend to think that, babies will learn social skills by being around other babies. That is not how it works. For the first 2 years, baby social skills will be built upon the foundation of how they were related to by adults in their lives. Have a look at Serve and Return by the Harvard Center for the Developing Child. Beautiful little video which just explains how babies are always giving us cues. They're making eye contact. They are making noises. They are kicking when we enter the room to draw our attention. And we need to return that serve, just like tennis. We need to return the serve so that they know that they're important, that they've been noticed. Sometimes it's just imitating them or making a funny sound back. It's talking to them. And as that little game goes on, it's also reading when they've had enough and when they want to continue. It sounds quite a lot like framing, giving and receiving those cues. So that's the foundation for social development. How do we encourage social and communicative play? Well, I've already alluded to the importance of a caregiver's actions and attitudes when we're playing with children, when they make mistakes, when they explore, how enthusiastic we are when they make a mess, giving them a safe place to explore. And then remember, the safe place is linked to that animal brain. And so feeling safe means that I can relate to others, that I can learn. And then when they are this age, they really need to be in a small group, not 15 children, not 20 children to one caregiver, but really a great ratio is 1 to 6, where they can get real focused attention, where they can have an in-tune caregiver. Children, as I've said, do not know innately how to socialize. They need to be shown how to share, how to take turns, how to communicate their needs, how to ask for something nicely and not just grab it, how to not bite or pull hair. Those are all the things I'm sure you're familiar with. So very, very important is the smaller the group, the more those social skills can actually develop in a healthy way.